Anything is possible. Somehow I think that's going to get around. Yeah. Gemar Chatima Tova. A good and sweet year to everyone. For several nights, Rabbi Isaac dreamed that he should go to Prague. He lived in Krakow, was the first, second generation of the Hasidic dynasties, 18th century. And he had this dream that he should go to Prague. So eventually he decided to make the long trek. It's not short, 300 miles or so. When he arrived there, he went directly to the royal bridge where the dream had told him to go, that he should begin digging under the bridge in Prague. But he noticed that soldiers were there day and night guarding the bridge, so he couldn't do it. He realized he couldn't get close enough to do it. He was afraid. One of the soldiers saw him and asked what he was doing near the bridge, and Rabbi Isaac told him the story of his dream. And the soldier began to mock him and said, I also had an often occurring dream. It's again and again, I've been dreaming that in the town of Krakow there's a Jew named Rabbi Isaac, and that there's a huge treasure buried under the stove of his home. But only a fool would have faith in the words of a dream. At that moment, Rabbi Isaac understood that heaven had sent him to Prague so that this soldier could inform him that he had a great treasure in his house, buried beneath his stove. And that, in fact, the treasure was his all along. So he went back home, dug underneath the stove, and there he found a great fortune of gold coins. Rabbi Isaac thus became very wealthy, gave a large amount of tzedakah to the poor, and a tremendous amount to his synagogue's high holidays appeal. I love this story. It's basically the Wizard of Oz with Payas. There's no place like home. The hero journeys far and wide. It's typical of so many classic stories, only to discover that the long-lost treasure is waiting at home all along. So there's a little twist, an interesting footnote to this story. 5 years ago, some of you in this room were with me in Prague. Our Bethel group was walking across the bridge to our hotel. The traffic was horrible. He let us off on the other side. We had to walk across the bridge. Could have been the same bridge. And we had treasure stolen. Mara's cell phone. Literally, just taken right out of her backpack. And yes, it was just an object, a thing, but we felt violated, helpless, and we knew that that phone would never be recovered. It was lost, and we spent the next several hours. Some of you might remember group members who went out to dinner and didn't bring us anything back. You might remember. That we had to stay in the hotel and call, and we were trying to figure out how to just speak the language to find the right operator to tell them that our phone was stolen. We finally found the T-Mobile service, and the operator was one of the kindest, most reassuring people I have ever encountered. Seriously, really. This was like the opposite of Ernestina from the phone company that Lily Tomlin used to do, where the phone company, we don't care. Well, this operator said, don't worry. Your new phone will be waiting for you when you get home. And sure enough, we got home a few weeks later, and our treasure was awaiting us on the kitchen counter, right next to the stove. Just like Rabbi Isaac, only ours was in a box marked T-Mobile. Now, Now, I know it was just a thing, but little did that customer service rep realize that she performed a big-time mitzvah in replacing that lost object. Because in Judaism, no thing is ever simply a thing. Even inanimate objects are on a journey of sorts, either toward being lost or being found. And one of our jobs, one of the great mitzvot, is to help reconnect people with their lost objects, with their things. Among the books I've read this year was a beautifully written memoir by Catherine Schultz, New Yorker writer, entitled Lost and Found. It's been a bestseller. You may have seen it. And it was well-timed because she had a loss of her father during this period, but also the COVID era has been, as we've heard, a time of great loss for people. But even in normal times, she points this out, we lose a lot of stuff. She writes about how sometimes these seemingly insignificant losses help to prepare us for the more significant and painful losses to come. On average, people misplace roughly 9 objects per day, which means that I have lost approximately 213,671 things in my life. We're talking cell phones, musical instruments, yarmulkes, dreidels, pens, flash drives, books, cameras, socks. Lots of socks. Only one, though, for each pair. And okay, passwords. Plus the page where I wrote down the passwords so I wouldn't forget them. Schultz says that while many of these losses can be regained, what can never be regained is the time spent looking for the missing objects. In the US, that amounts to some 54 million hours spent searching per day. Estimated cost domestically, $30 billion a year on cell phones alone. Some spiritual traditions believe that losing so many items helps us to develop skills of non-attachment, which helps to cultivate self-mastery, reduce stress, and achieve inner peace. We have to learn to accept our losses graciously and not be overly committed to the possessions that we have in the first place. But there's something that's sort of troublesome about, something robotic about the concept of non-attachment, something not natural. It's been said, according to researchers, that artificial intelligence, robots can't yet feel attachment, connection. It's one thing we haven't conquered yet. That's good. Although we can still become attached to them. And I from firsthand, like that robot at Stop and Shop, Marty. I have conversations with Marty. And I could swear, I once saw a tear in Marty's googly eyes when there was yet another cleanup on aisle 5. Always aisle 5. I must confess, I've never been able to attach myself to non-attachment. But I don't think the Torah wants us to. In fact, the key to understanding loss in Judaism came to me a few months ago when I lost the key to my car. Now, in truth, I've lost far more important things over the past few years, but the loss of this key was a turning point for me because it just disappeared. Some things you put in the same place every night because you definitely don't want to lose it. That key I put every night in the same place without fail, and I woke up one morning and I looked in that spot and it was not there. It was gone, vanished. Now, I'd also not long before misplaced the backup key and hadn't gotten around, busy, to replacing it. And this was one of those special keys that needed to be programmed by a computer, and it seems like half of NASA is involved. And to replace it would cost $600. So I was stuck. I cannot estimate how many hours I wasted looking for that key. Now, not totally wasted, because I figured I could recoup some of the time if I used the story in a high holiday sermon. And then I could write it off. Just kidding, just kidding. I mean, I looked everywhere. Under the seat of the car, in the garage. You know, I checked the dogs very carefully and followed them around the yard for a couple of days. I was afraid one, God forbid, might have swallowed it. And, you know, nothing. Thank God, nothing came out. By the way, our youngest dog, Kobe, the youngest of the Hammer poodles, is a real maven at finding things. Sometimes we let him out, he runs right over to the bushes in the backyard, one spot, sticks his long nose way in, comes out with a tennis ball, like pulling a rabbit out of his hat. It's like he'd been scheming, he'd been thinking about it all night. I'm going to get that ball as soon as I go outside. Sort of like Rabbi Isaac, he always finds the treasure. I don't know if losing little things prepares us for bigger losses, but it definitely prepares us for Yom Kippur. Nothing says you are a flawed, incompetent, bungling ignoramus more than losing a car key and having no spare. It makes you feel very limited. It reminds us that every loss renders someone a loser. Schultz talks about how profoundly humbling that is. It forces us to confront our limitations and how powerless we are to protect our loved ones when it matters most, and how to prevent change from happening. It makes us realize that no matter how much we try to control our environment, loss happens. We are prisoners of the law of entropy. Things just fall apart. We try so hard to manage our things, but no matter what we do, it doesn't matter. Schultz writes, a lost wallet, a lost treasure, a lost father, a lost species. As different as they are, they and every other missing thing suddenly seems fundamental to the problem of how to live. It seems in being gone to have something urgent to say about our being here. She says we need to lose things because, above all, it forces us to confront the limits of existence. The fact that sooner or later it is in the nature of almost everything to vanish or perish. And she adds, so many losses routinely precede the final one now. Loss of memory, mobility, autonomy, physical strength, intellectual aptitude, and perhaps above all, the feeling that we are still becoming, the loss of that sense of potential, that there are things in the world that are left for us to do. All of these things are lost as the years go by. So we should hold on to what we've got, to the life we've got, relentlessly. We should hold on to all of that. And you know, when they say we shouldn't obsess over every little thing, well, I say, well, maybe we should sweat the small stuff, because nothing is truly small. The Talmud actually says this explicitly. It says, Ein lecha adam she'en lo sha'a ve'en lecha davar she'en lo makom. Do not underrate the importance of anything, for there is no person who does not have their hour, and no thing without its place. So sweat the small stuff too. Not as much as the big stuff, but still. Now, Eastern religions promote non-attachment. And to be fair, I'm a great admirer of Eastern thought, have studied it. And the Dalai Lama, for one, makes clear that detachment does not mean disengagement or indifference. So this is not a polemic against Eastern traditions. But I believe that Judaism has a doctrine of non-detachment. In Judaism, attachment is the objective. Attachment to life, to our loved ones, to the ideals we cherish, and yes, even to material things that make those attachments more real to us. Things that are tangible, touchable, huggable, smellable, that pique our senses, make us completely alive and aware, from a toddler's first teddy bear to the talus we choose to be buried with. Think of Queen Elizabeth's funeral. I had COVID that week. I saw everything. All nonstop. That overpowering moment when her crown was removed from the top of the casket. That was something that was actually very Jewish, steeped in ritual, demonstrating how our lives are immersed in the sanctity of things. The difference is we don't worship any human being as supreme ruler. The Torahs have crowns. And how powerful it is to kiss a Torah, to take the crown off, to open it up, to reveal the words written by hand by a scribe, the sacred words of the Torah, which is just a thing, but certainly not small stuff. So anyway, a few days after I lost my car key, gave up, went down to the car dealer with my tail between my legs. The guy laughed at me for losing the backup key. I was going to give him a Hebrew test and try to even things up, but it's okay, I understand. And $600 later, they made me a new key. And then 1 month later, I lost my car. What I mean is I traded it in. It had nearly 200,000 miles on it. Priuses can go forever, but it was time, inflation, interest rates going up, didn't want to get stuck, so new car. And I had to hand over that $600 key that they had just made. And I had to hand over the car that I had for over a decade with my kids' college bumper stickers still in the back, and the napkin from Dunkin' Donuts from 2013, and a glove compartment filled with yarmulkes. You think your glove compartment has yarmulkes? My glove compartment. I have yarmulkes. I have bags of black Shiva ribbons. I bet you don't have those. I had to say goodbye to the car. It was not easy. I don't non-attach very well. Life is a constant game of lost and found. There is not a moment in our lives when we aren't losing. When you think of it, every breath is an exercise in losing and gaining. Every tick of the clock is a lost opportunity and a reminder of our impermanence. And our sages understood this. One of the most important mitzvot is what is called Hashavat Avedah, returning lost items. Pages and pages of the Talmud are devoted to it. It's a beautiful mitzvah. If we find a lost object, not only are we obligated to return it to the rightful owner, but we're also forbidden from ignoring it. We have to consider the feelings of our neighbor. We cannot be indifferent. Even if that neighbor is our enemy, the Torah specifies. In that sense, the lost possession is the friendship itself. And the commandment is to turn the enemy back into a friend. The rabbis, it's a real chutzpah kind of move. They said the entire purpose of what seems like a very trivial mitzvah, pick up something, return it, but it is of ultimate importance. It makes us better people. They said it subdues the evil inclination. In a way, it's a twofer. You return a lost object and you make an enemy into a friend. So you're overcoming greed and anger at the same time. And that can only happen if the objects have value. So we respect that value. We are attached to that value. There is attachment. The pillar of Jewish morality here is based on the presumption that we love our cattle, our jewelry, our Pooh Bears, our blankies, and would be eternally grateful if they are returned and bereft when they are suddenly gone. When we look at a tragedy like last week's hurricane, horrible. or we haven't since Rosh Hashanah, of course, we haven't met, to think for a moment about how our prayers are with all of our brothers and sisters, all of those who are in Florida, for our congregation and everyone else. And the main focus obviously should be on the loss of life, but the Torah is saying there's a real mitzvah to be had in helping those who've lost their possessions. That's no small thing. On CNN, State Representative Spencer Roach, a Republican whose district represents Lee County, told the reporter, "I lost everything I own. I have 2 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, and a pair of shoes to my name. Everything is gone." Now, I wonder why they needed to mention the party here, because if they were reading their Torah, they would know that the mitzvah is to help both your friend and your opponent. It shouldn't matter at all. The idea is to help, and I hope we all will. Curiously, the Torah's command to return items, b'hashevota lo, as it says in Deuteronomy, is repeated twice. So commentators had to try to dig up, all right, the direct lost item. What else does it mean? Maimonides, he says, it's not just about returning items, it's about saving lives. That's the most valuable item one can give, to save a life. And he went even further in saying it's not just about saving lives, it's about healing the sick. Healing is returning an item, returning the health to a person. So reinstating a friendship, restoring life, returning someone to good health, all from this little mitzvah that comes from sweating the small stuff, the objects, the things. So the next question with this mitzvah is the rabbis had to figure out when would the owner give up? There's got to be a point, a logical point where you assume, you find something, you hold on to it, you advertise, whatever, no one reports. When does the owner give up? If someone finds my car key now, they can have it. But they would assume, I would think, there's no markings on it, that the owner has given up. The rabbis call this interesting word yeush, despair. The general rule is that the original owner's yeush releases the object into the public domain, thereby allowing the finder to keep it. Those of you who were here last week might remember on Rosh Hashanah that I talked about Nachman of Bratslav speaking about yeush. And he said, Asur lehityaesh, it is forbidden to despair. And it was in the context of a much broader message of his, but it really comes back to this mitzvah. This is an important mitzvah. What he's saying is, you should never give up on hope of recovering something that's lost. And he went on to sort of say, and to actually say, that what seems lost never really is lost at all. Fascinating. Perhaps there's a bigger picture we're not seeing, a future world where we'll be reunited with our socks and our keys and our parents. Perhaps there's a deeper reality in this world where underlying bonds that connect us are indeed unbreakable. Beneath the surface, everything is linked. There is most definitely a spiritual side to material things. A few weeks ago, there was a point of view, a POV movie on PBS called Love and Stuff. It's been on some circuits as well. Filmmaker Judith Helfand discusses the agonizing process of breaking up her departed mother's Upper West Side apartment, a process that so many of us can relate to. And she's a saver, much like me. She asked, well, would I ever use the pewter, or my mom's favorite pressed glass cereal bowls, or my mother's meat grinder? She saved it all. She found her mother's baby teeth. She saved it. What do you do with that? Does the tooth fairy give compound interest? I mean, I could relate to Helfand's dilemma. When I downsized my mother to a new apartment years ago, we ended up stacking the new place with so many boxes of stuff that we just couldn't bear to part with that my 90-year-old mother had to climb over boxes to get to the couch. It was a little excessive, but like Helfand, I just can't throw anything out. It's going to hit home now. As we prepare to move from a house where we've lived for over 30 years, I'll have to revisit one last time those boxes of my mom's stuff in the basement. I barely touched them since her death. I'm sure many of us are in that position. You just sort of take it, I'll get to it. You can't get to it. It's going to be the equivalent of an unatana tokef, except, who shall live, who shall die, except it'll be with magazines, life magazines, and cassette tapes, and the heart-shaped cake pan that she used every year for her son's Valentine's Day birthday. And with each thing I discard, and you have to, a little bit of my mom will die once again. Helfand comments, I couldn't bring myself to go through my mom's stuff when she was alive. It was only afterward that I realized how much fun we could have had if I just listened to her and gone through all the stuff with her. I found her wedding invite list, the packing list from her honeymoon, photos from her favorite tantes, her aunts, her mother's favorite cooking utensils. We actually could have had a great time. It would have generated stories, spiritual, practical, grounded in family lore, my mother's uncanny wisdom, wit, and language. We could have organized this stuff by theme, by era, her side of the family, my dad's side of the family, secrets, gift from my father she loved or loathed, but never told him. All the unspoken cooking tricks that I never stopped to learn using the pots and pans I would inevitably keep. The sanctity of things goes beyond objects to the realm of senses, too. At another point in the film, Helfand, who's much younger here, is about to move out of her childhood home, and on a video asks her mom to recreate the squeaking sound that she and her dad would make when they opened the front door. And it made me recall the sacred sounds of my youth, the crying screech of the rotisserie, making a chicken on Friday afternoon. I never ate it, but I loved the sound, or the slow clomp of my dad's heavy steps climbing the stairs at night, and the unmistakable musty smell of my grandmother's old couch. Our emotions are so totally enmeshed in things that can be seen, heard, tasted, held, and smelled. These are the lost treasures buried by Reb Isaac Stowe. Now, it's technically called the Proust effect, how objects, especially smells, trigger memories, and it's not surprising that Marcel Proust had Jewish ancestry, though he never considered himself to be a Jew. Researchers have demonstrated how memories are triggered by senses. And those senses are triggered by things. And because I'm clergy, I've seen all over the years countless situations where people are suffering from dementia, many relatives of people in this room. How they wouldn't be able to remember something that happened 5 minutes before, but put their grandfather's Kiddush cup in their hand, or start singing some blessings, and it all comes rushing back. Sometimes I feel that is the clergy's job more than anything else, to reconnect. Religion means reconnect, religio, to reconnect people to their memories, to their past. It is miraculous to see, and I see it all the time. I saw it with my own mother when she was in the nursing home, the Jewish home, and I would bring her down every week to light the candles. Even if it was Thursday, I couldn't get there on Friday, whatever, I'd bring her down because as soon as she saw something glowing, she would spring into action with those blessings by heart. When it comes to things that are sacred, perhaps no, of course, we are the people of the book. Books evoke more personal responses than anything else. It always troubles me. We bury books. We don't throw them away, holy books. And people will often bring us books to bury, and they're books that have everyone's birthday from 150 years ago in that cedar. Why are you giving that to me? So the journalist Ari Goldman wrote recently of the legacy of Philip Birnbaum. Some might remember he was in the late 1900s, mid-century, he wrote an iconic siddur. He died in 1988. And it turns out the name Philip with one L was misspelled on his gravestone in Westchester County, but no one had noticed from then till now because he had no heirs. He was a well-known author, and he made such an impact on people's lives. So Ari Goldman saw that gravestone and said, how could no one know? How could no one? That man meant so much to me, and to him. I used his siddur every morning when I was a teenager. I prayed, I davened every morning as a teen after my bar mitzvah in the corner of my bedroom where the desks sort of come together. And that prayer book was the one that I used. But it's not even because of the praying in that book. It's because the praying in that book reminded me of my first pet, Venus the cat. Full name, Venus Fleatrap. And she used to sleep in her basket and purr while I prayed, right next to the window. And Goldman wrote, Ari Goldman, about his mother, his late mother, who would regularly kiss her Birnbaum siddur, both before and after she prayed. And I remember a family in this congregation, very similar situation, an old prayer book that she owned, that she just held, even with dementia. She held that prayer book. Anyway, he said on its cover and many of its pages, I can still see her lipstick. That's why we never destroy holy books. We bury them like people. We kiss them. Mezuzahs, Torah scrolls, books, they are like people. God's sacred presence extends to inanimate objects, to the small stuff. Martin Buber, of course, with I and Thou, talks about it a lot. He said you can love a tree, even more a book. I'm pleased to say that Philip Birnbaum's grave has been fixed. In the first word of the mitzvah, Hashavat Avedah, returning lost items, you can find the root letters, same word, same root, teshuvah, repentance. The act of teshuvah is the ultimate return of a lost object. What are we returning? We're returning and restoring a sense of priorities, a renewed integrity, a connection to one's past. The 19th century Hasidic sage known as the Sfat Emet says that every day a heavenly voice announces a valuable lost object, the Torah, has been found and is waiting to be claimed. And we are all lost objects, lost in the woods, but we can find our way out with the help of teshuvah, along with grandmother's challah recipe. We can find ourselves through the smells, the touch, the sight, the memories, which provide the key to a deeper purpose in our lives. E.M. Forster said, only connect, to which Judaism says, never detach in the first place. And if your neighbor has lost something precious, whether their health, their life partner, or their grandmother's meat grinder, or their Jewish connection, return it to your neighbor. We are commanded to care and to connect. And with so many happy returns, the only thing we have to lose is loss itself. And those who advise us to leave things behind, the decluttering movement, my response is yes, we can leave it behind if we're talking about the burdens of trauma and guilt and excessive regret, but we should keep close to our hearts, in some form, even scanned the things and people that we remember and we love. So I read this summer about a little girl in Boston named Javi. She was diagnosed at 15 months with Tay-Sachs. It was a tragic mistake in the parents' genetic screening. When her parents got the news, they were devastated, naturally, and they knew that she would die within a couple of years. But they refused to give in to loss. People, including Javi's mom, Myra, and her own rabbi, had warned Myra and her husband that they should begin to detach, to protect themselves. He was looking out for them, so their daughter was sliding from life. Otherwise, they would emotionally be unable to take it. They would crash. But they did just the opposite. They found new ways to intensify their bond to their daughter and her life experience. They actually compressed time. Every week became a year. Every Shabbat became a birthday. They called it a Shabirthday. They stared down detachment, and they kept blowing up the balloons and daring them to burst every week, and they had lots of cake, and they couldn't miss a single Shabbat, even if it coincided, as it did one year, with Yom Kippur. So on Yom Kippur, they had a picnic at the beach with blueberry smoothies as Javi played along among the autumn leaves and smelled the scent of the ocean. In the end, Javi had 57 Shabirthdays before she finally succumbed to the disease. Her parents are still celebrating her Shabirthdays, complete with smoothies and cake, and today, I would guess, on Yom Kippur, another walk on the beach. They are the embodiment of what Nachman of Bratslav was talking about. They never gave in to loss. They never gave in to yeush, to despair. As Myra put it, they decided to celebrate the blank out of her. That's how we live, from one Shabirthday to the next, and that's it. Catherine Schultz writes, over and over, loss calls on us to reckon with this universal impermanence. It's nice to be neat, but the clutter is not the enemy. The clutter of too many things is not the enemy. Mortality is. Time is. Unless, like Javi's parents, we learn to embrace it one Shabirthday to the next. This impermanence haunts us. It's baffling, maddening, heartbreaking. The fact that something that was just here can be all of a sudden just gone. Our time together will soon run out as well. After Rosh Hashanah, some commented to me they were blindsided by my discussion of leaving, as they hadn't seen the announcement of my plans. Given that this announcement, this email, came out literally 1 hour before Queen Elizabeth's passing, some confusion was inevitable. Ethan even called me, my eldest, and asked whether he was now first in line of succession to be the next rabbi. When I leave my active service at Temple Bethel, there will be a sense of loss. I'm feeling it already, and sensing that many of you are as well. The years came and went in a blink. I look out and I see so many very different people from 35 years ago, and many of the same. So I've seen time rolling along year to year from standing up here, and it seems like yesterday. But wherever I go, the holiness of this 36-year and counting relationship will continue to reverberate. We'll grieve for what is lost, but we'll also celebrate what we still have. Now, George Washington, you might be surprised to hear this, never actually said, we're going to teach them how to say goodbye. That was Lin-Manuel Miranda. And we're not going to do that anyway, because in Hebrew there is no word that just means goodbye. We're going to teach them how to say shalom, which is the most brilliant word ever invented. Shalom is the answer to Nachman of Bratslaw's riddle. What does it mean when Reb Nachman says there is no such thing as Yeush, that nothing is ever really lost, that we should never, in fact, give in to despair? And the answer is shalom. Our word for goodbye has a little hello in it, as my father used to sing in that song, the Broadway song from the early 60s. That same word contains a little hello, a little goodbye, a lot of completeness, and a whole lot of peace. Inner peace. And isn't that what the non-attachment people were saying they were talking about? But shalom is not that. Shalom is the ultimate attachment of all the puzzle parts. It makes everything whole. It literally means wholeness. Shalem, shlemut, wholeness. And that's where we will be. Complete. In life, we need to embrace the impermanence of all our relationships. That begins with things, but always ends with people. I began these holidays with the assertion that some call this a break glass moment for the world, and the losses have been beyond measure. But for Jews, every moment is also a break the glass moment. A time to celebrate all our attachments to those dead and alive, lost and rediscovered, living and inanimate. As we blow up another balloon and revel in another Shabirthday, let's take a good, hard look under the stove. For surely there is buried treasure to be found there, and it's something very sacred. Could be a cake pan, could be a prayer book, could be a tennis ball, could be a friendship, and it could be ourselves. Or to be more precise, the person we used to be, the person who was lost years and years ago and then was found, wandering on a bridge in Prague. Amen.